Hey everyone, today I'm going to introduce you to all of my snakes. I don't have a whole lot of snakes, I only have 3, and they're all ball pythons, but they're all very different in their own way. I have already shown off all of these snakes on my channel, however, this is the first time I'm going to be putting all of them in one video. All of my snakes are actually named after the X-Men, because I am a huge nerd. I've got my snake hook handy, let's go ahead and get to it. Let's start out with the snake I've had for the longest. This is Charles. He is my blue-eyed leucistic ball python. His exact morph is Super Mojave. They call him a blue-eyed leucistic because he has blue eyes. And he is a leucistic snake, meaning he has no color or pattern at all. He is just pure white. Now there are different types of blue-eyed leucistics. There are several different genetic combinations, several different morphs that you can breed in order to get a blue-eyed leucistic. Charles is a Super Mojave, which means he has 2 dominant Mojave genes. And unlike other blue-eyed leucistics, Charles actually has kind of a gray head. And I know that this isn't picking up very well on camera, but his body is actually somewhat yellow, not really just pure white. Charles is the snake that I have had the longest. I got him in September of 2018, so I have had him for over a year now. He was hatched in January of 2018, and so he is getting close to the 2-year-old mark. Out of all of my snakes, he is the nicest and has the most docile temperament, and he is very handleable. Unlike my other ball pythons though, he does move quite a bit when I'm handling him, and that's why throughout this video, you'll probably see him in different positions around my body, rather than just being wrapped around my arm in one spot like he is now. He's constantly on the move, he just does not sit still when he's being handled. Case in point, I've got snake handcuffs on now. Speaking of Charles's personality, he has the most timid personality out of all of my snakes as well. And when it comes to how he interacts with his enclosure, he basically spends most of his time hiding inside of his hide. He doesn't come out and explore and climb around very much. He just spends most of his time inside one of his 2 hides, usually his warm hide. He's also my pickiest eater. I don't know if this is because he's a male, he is my only male. However, a couple of times a year he decides he wants to go off feed for an extended amount of time. As you can imagine, this can be very frustrating to keep buying him food and offering him food and him not eating it. He has now done this twice where he's just decided he doesn't want to eat for an extended amount of time, and I keep offering him food, and eventually he starts eating again. But, during that time, it's very concerning that he's not eating. In fact, the first time that he went off feed, he didn't eat for about 4 months, and I was very concerned. So concerned, in fact, that I took him to the vet, and within a week of taking him to the vet, he just randomly started eating again on his own. And had I just waited, he probably would have started eating again anyway. He did grow very fast from the time I got him. I did a video, actually, about a week after I got him, and he was itty bitty at that time. He could fit just in the palm of one hand, and it has been about a year since I got him. As you can see, he is quite a big boy now. He has always eaten frozen thawed rodents. I have never had to feed him a live rodent. However, when he went off feed, I did attempt to feed him live rodents, and he didn't take them. He was afraid of them, and sometimes he's even afraid of the frozen thawed rodents. He's so docile and so timid, in fact, that when I feed him, I can't hold the food in front of him with tongs. He won't strike at it. It will just annoy him. Instead, what I have to do is drop feed him, meaning I just lay the rodent on top of one of his hides with the head dangling down in front of the entrance, and he'll eat it in his own time. He doesn't constrict around it like all of my other ball pythons do. He is just a very timid and shy and docile animal, and he prefers to drop feed. I'm going to go ahead and put Charles back, and we will move on to the next snake. Who's a good boy, huh? Are you a good boy? Yeah. So that was my oldest snake. Now this is my youngest snake. This is Jean Grey. She is the second ball python that I got. and she was hatched in January of 2019, so she is a full year younger than Charles. Female ball pythons do get to be much larger than male ball pythons, and so she still has quite a bit of growing to do. Charles is actually almost full grown, and Jean is still very small compared to how big she's going to get when she gets older. I named her Jean Grey because of her morph. She has a lot of gray coloring. She is actually a pastel purple passion ball python. The purple passion morph is actually a combination of the Mojave gene, which Charles is a super Mojave, as well as the Mystic gene. So when you mix Mojave and Mystic together, you get a purple passion. But she was sold to me actually as a pastel purple passion, meaning she has the pastel gene as well. Just looking at her by herself with no other snake next to her to compare her to, she does look like just a normal purple passion. She does not look like she has the pastel gene in her at all. But side by side next to her clutch mates, when I bought her, I could definitely see that her dorsal stripe was actually much more yellow than her clutch mates. And so that could be a sign of the pastel gene being in her genetics. I also suspect that maybe, just maybe, she might have lesser in her as well, but I can't confirm that. And the reason that I suspect this is because when looking at her coloring, I do happen to see a gradient where her background color is darker closer to her spine, and as it fades down her body, it gets a little bit lighter. The breeder gave me no indication that lesser was anywhere in her bloodline, so I have no reason to believe that other than just how she looks. Now, you might have noticed that she is not like Charles in the sense that when I'm holding her, she stays a lot more still. She's not as explory as Charles was. Charles was all over me. She's just staying still. And that is how it typically goes when handling her. She doesn't like to move around a whole lot when being handled. She pretty much stays still the whole time. Her personality is actually very different than Charles. When it comes to how she behaves inside her enclosure, she is the one that is out exploring the most. She is the one that is always constantly climbing up on the sides of her enclosure and in the vines that I have hanging up on the sides of the enclosure. Sometimes she even climbs up into the wires that are run to the lights. One time when I went to feed her, she was actually hanging up inside those wires with her head sticking down. And so I just put the rat in front of her, and she sure did strike it and wrap around it while still hanging. She didn't drop down at all. She ate it, completely ate it, while hanging from those wires. She certainly seems to think that she is an arboreal snake. She is a lot feistier than Charles is. Although she's never struck at me or bit me or anyone, she has struck at me through the glass a couple of times. There's been 2 times that I can think of where she has struck at the glass while I'm standing right in front of it. And if the glass hadn't been there, she would have struck at me. I don't know if this was a feeding response or if it was because I startled her or what, but she has actually tried to strike at me through the glass on 2 separate occasions. One of them was just yesterday. She was a very defensive baby when I first got her, but as you can see, she is just fine now. I have handled her quite a bit since I got her, and she's very used to me. Also, when she was in quarantine, her quarantine setup was right next to my bed, and she got to spend a lot of time looking at me and viewing me while she was in quarantine, so she got very used to my presence. A full-grown female ball python will be between 5 and 6 feet long and much heavier bodied than a male ball python. And currently Jean is almost 2 feet long. When I got her, she was eating live fuzzy rats, and because of that, the very first 2 times that I fed her, I did feed her live feeders. However, it went really well. She didn't hesitate at all, and so on her 3rd feeding, I did switch her over to frozen thawed, and she hesitated for a second, but she did take it, and she's been taking frozen thawed ever since. So transitioning her away from live to frozen thawed was super easy, and I feel like had I went ahead and just went for feeding her frozen thawed right when I got her, she probably would have taken it. It was probably unnecessary for me to do live feedings the first couple of times that I fed her. However, just to make sure she would eat, that is what I did at the recommendation of the breeder. She does love her food, however, and she typically does not miss meals. She's never gone on a hunger strike, and the only time she has ever not eaten was when she was really deep in shed. She was very interested in the food, but she couldn't see to strike it, and unlike Charles, she does strike and constrict her food, so she did not take that one time when she was deep in shed. However, every other time that I've fed her, she has eaten, and I do feed her every single week. When she gets bigger, she won't need to eat quite as often, but she is still growing. She still has quite a bit of growing to do, and so she is still eating every single week. I'm going to go ahead and put her back now, and we'll move on to the next snake. Finally, this is Kitty. She is named after Kitty Pryde, aka Shadowcat. She is the girl that can walk through walls. However, in addition to being named after Kitty Pryde from the X-Men, I have always wanted to have a snake named Kitty, just because I always thought it would be hilarious to have a snake named Kitty, especially a snake that's going to get big, and being a female ball python, she is going to get big. Kitty is the most recent snake that I got. I got her just a couple of months ago at a reptile expo. However, as you can tell, she is definitely bigger than Jean is. In fact, she's about the same size as Charles. Kitty was actually hatched in July of 2018, so she is over a year old, getting close to a year and a half old. As I mentioned earlier when I had Jean out, female ball pythons get much larger than the males do, so where Charles is almost full grown, currently she's about the same size as Charles, maybe just a little bit smaller, but she will actually grow to be almost twice as big as Charles. Now, she is not very used to handling. I have been working with her ever since I got her, however, she is still very defensive. When I go near her enclosure, she coils up and she S's like she's going to strike. She has not struck at me at all, but it gets very stiff and very defensive, and she does display defensive behavior when I go to take her out of the enclosure. I know she looks just fine right now, and that is because I'm handling her and she realizes I'm not a threat. But if I were to startle her for whatever reason, or to intimidate her, she would very quickly get very defensive. Her morph is actually a combination of pastel and lesser. She is a pastel lesser ball python, and that is why she is so yellow. Normal ball pythons are not this yellow. She is very yellow in coloration because of the pastel gene, and also the lesser gene. She actually definitely does have the lesser gene. It was confirmed by the breeder that I got her from, but if you look at her coloring, you can see that up near her spine she's very dark, and as you get closer to her belly, she fades in color and becomes more and more white. That is what the lesser gene is known to do. Also, unlike Jean and Charles, she has green eyes. I don't know if you can see them on camera because of the lighting, but her eyes are very green. That is also due to her genetics. Oh, I just noticed there's a hole in my shirt. That's gonna bother me, and you now. Personality-wise, she is the most defensive snake that I have out of all of them. She does climb sometimes, but not nearly as much as Jean does. Sometimes, however, I do find her coiled up on top of her hide. She has like a basket hide, which is normally used for rodents like hamsters and whatnot, but I use that for her because it was a lot cheaper than a reptile hide, and she likes to climb on top of it and coil around on top of her hide and observe everything. She also does like to explore and move around a lot more like Jean does. Not nearly as much as Jean, because like I said, she's not a big climber like Jean is, but she doesn't spend all of her time inside her hide either like Charles does. However, when I'm holding her, she is very much like Charles, where she's constantly on the move and looking to get away. When I got her, the breeder said she was eating both live food and frozen thawed, so I went ahead and just started feeding her frozen thawed immediately when I got her, and that has worked out very well. She did not need to transition or anything like that. She just started eating frozen thawed right away for me. However, while she was in quarantine, she did have a bad shed. I had to assist her with that shed, and she did not like that one bit. Now that she's out of quarantine, she's on a humidity retaining substrate. She's had good sheds ever since then, but she did have a bad shed when she was on the paper towel substrate, and when I tried to assist her with that, she spent the whole time fighting me. And in fact, she did take a couple of strikes towards me the whole time. She didn't actually get me, she didn't actually bite me, but she did attempt to bite me a couple of times when I was trying to help her with her shed. I am going to go ahead and put her back because she does seem kind of stressed out from all this handling, so I'm just going to let her be. She doesn't really enjoy being handled as much as Charles and Jean do. Well, there you go, guys. Those are my 3 snakes, all ball pythons. Charles Xavier, Jean Grey, and Kitty. I don't currently have any plans to get any more snakes. 3 is a good number of snakes for me right now. Maybe in the future, I might branch out and get some more snakes, perhaps of different species. Right now, I'm at a good number of animals. They occupy quite a bit of my time, however, it's not completely overwhelming quite yet, but I don't want to get to the point where it is, and so I'm not currently looking to take any more in. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure you hit that like button down below, and if you're new here, hit that subscribe button as well as the notification bell so that way you get notified when I upload a new video. As always, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.